Here we are at Chesterfield's wonderful Queen's Gardens ground, where I spend one day each year, and my friend Nigel, who's behind the camera, invites me, and I invite him to see Yorkshire play at Scarborough, and we have a wonderful time. Now, Nigel and I have worked together for over 20 years, and Nigel's a researcher and he's been involved in all the enterprise support work that I've tried to do over the last couple of decades or more. 45% of professional cricketers are actually from public schools, and the drift is even further. In one test match in England, there were 8 players from a private education background. The top administrators are from private education background, and it's very, very difficult for us to think that they are not actually running the game for themselves rather than spectators, and certainly women. What has happened in tennis, thanks to Billie Jean King's and the Martina Navratilovanas, has never really happened in cricket. So the women cricketers may feel well looked after, but in actual fact they are still second-class citizens in the game. Yet every single one of these people, if they actually came to a women's game, would realise that when they'd been playing cricket, they weren't as good as the professional cricketers that are women. And this is where exclusivity is the real problem. So our judges, the majority of them are from public schools, from private education. MPs, ministers. What we have is a group of people where 45% or 50% of the people running in the city and various things are from this exclusive group, and they are male dominated from private education schools. And so what they do is they're actually playing a game. I read a book in 2002 by Philip Gigantes, and it was called Power and Greed, and it was really about a short history of the world, and it was really about men actually working to make the rich richer and them more powerful, if you like, and that's how our wars take place. I have a view that the only way that we get to kind leadership, the only way that we actually get to trickle up rather than trickle down, which never does trickle down, we end up with, as we have in England, with 4 million children in poverty, with 3.8 million self-employed freelancers and micro-business owners excluded from income support. We'll never get to trickle up unless we get kind leadership in place. And that's where women come in. Because my view is that unless we get the majority of women that are actually outside of this exclusive club making the decisions, then we will have men making the decisions for that group of men rather than future generations. And that's present in climate crisis, it's present in all kinds of things. For example, in the 1820s, all the people that you can think of, like great writers like Mary Shelley, Jane Austen, entrepreneurs like Anne Lister, all of these kind of people were self-educated. They weren't allowed to learn classics, for example, but they did. They learned it themselves. They actually made sure that they were more professional, more competent, and took leadership roles, and they influenced society in a way that made our society better. So that by the time you got to someone like George Eliot with Middlemarch and various things, you know, George Eliot was translating German religious texts, and she was well known as Mary Evans, an editor, before became George Eliot the novelist. They'd self-educated. Virginia Woolf got to a point where she her own publishing company and said, well, I'm the only writer in England that writes what I want to write, and was able to influence them. My hero is Kanye King and what she's done with the Mobile Awards. My business partner Claire took on, when her father and her husband unfortunately died in the same year, she actually took on a commercial property company worth millions, etc., and had learned how to actually run that successfully, which she has done for the last 12 years. I work day to day with Jen Crowther, Chief Executive Yorkshire in Business. She's achieving more than any male entrepreneur I've ever worked with in my long, lucky life, as a result of her self-development and actually taking a leadership role. My view is that kind leadership is only going to happen. We only have to go back to the 19th century to realise that men's arrogance and power and greed, and not allowing women into the medical profession, for example, meant that it was the men that were actually causing the deaths of women in childbirth, including Mary Shelley's mother, who was very influential in women's rights, Mary Wollstonecraft. And it was down to actually hygiene. It was as simple as that. It was down to hygiene, that it was a lottery in childbirth. So what I'm saying is that we have to reverse the position so that we actually get a majority of women in our boardrooms. I'm not saying that all women are not going to be interested in power and greed, but I do believe that women are more likely to be interested in their children, in future generations, in actually high levels of confidence and professionalism rather than exclusivity, that they regard inclusivity as meaning a sense of belonging, everyone belonging, rather than a tick box section, which I honestly believe that private education is something that Alan Bennett was saying, is that they are creating a different world that is not of the world of everyone belonging, it's about exclusivity. And so my final point is, women of the world unite, actually ensure that we've got the majorities in the Westminster and the city and in the professions, so that these kind leadership decisions which increase productivity, that ensure trickle up and enterprise and self-development come in. And I brought along a seagull for Nigel, and it says gulls just want to have fun on it. And we came from the Theatre of Chips, our ground in Scarborough, and it says gulls just want to have fun, and I would say gulls just want to have power.